Within our narrative genres, there are 5 elements of story structure. And these are things that happen in 99.9% of narrative stories. So you will find that this list varies if you do a Google search on elements of story structure because they're characterized slightly different or called different things. But these are the backbones of our fiction stories. The first one is plot, and this is the sequence of events that the characters are involved in a situation in a story. And most of the time the plot has a conflict situation, and this is to keep our reader interested. And so that is a characteristic when you're teaching boys and girls even to write in the fiction genre, that they need to have a problem and a solution within their story. Always in our fiction story we have characters, and these are the people or the personified animals that interact in the story. Our story characters can be broken down into main characters and then some flat characters, but our main characters have traits that add to the story. Many times the students must infer these character traits to understand the depth of the story. Our third category or element in story structure for fiction is the setting. And setting is when and where the story takes place. And we ask boys and girls to identify both of those parts to get an understanding of what it's like and to make connections to the story. There are actually 4 parts to setting: the location of the story, the weather in the story, the time period of the story, and then the time of the day or the elapsed time that occurs throughout the story. One of the things we also analyze when we talk about story is the setting the same throughout the story, or does the setting change throughout the story? And also when we look at setting, we look at how much it aids in our comprehension. The fourth element of story structure is point of view, and this is the perspective of the person sharing the story. And is this story told from a narrator? Is the story told from a character in the book? Who is doing the talking and the thinking in the story? Also, dialogue will change the point of view of the story, because that means that it's not just told from one point of view. It may be told from more than one point of view. And some of our fantastic fiction stories kind of go back and forth between point of views, especially when you get into novels or chapter books. And understanding the point of view leads the reader to the understanding of the characters and the events in the story. If they don't understand who's telling the story, they sometimes have a hard time understanding, and making connections to the text. This happens more as we get to complex stories. When we're thinking about our pre-K and our kindergarten and even some of the first grade stories, some of them are very basic, and point of view doesn't matter so much for comprehension. But when we get into more involved texts later in first grade and on, it's definitely important to analyze the point of view. Point of view is also interesting because once they learn point of view, they can put that into their writing, and it really changes the elements of their story writing for fiction. The last element of story structure is theme. And this is the main meaning or purpose of the story, and sometimes there's more than one. Oftentimes when it comes to theme, we also look at author's purpose. Why did the author write this story? And we classify that as the acronym PI. And PI stands for P, persuade the reader, I, inform the reader, and E, entertain the reader. So before you even get to theme, sometimes we say, why did the author write this book? And is it to persuade us of something? Is it to inform us? Or is it to entertain us? And from there, we can look more deeply at the themes in the story. What is the message or main idea? Sometimes these are explicit. It means they are clearly stated, and it's very simple to pick them out and pick out the supporting details. But sometimes they're implicit, and that means they're implied or inferred, and we have to look at all the little pieces and put those clues together to really figure out the theme of the story. And I'd like you to watch the video to your right and see how all of these components come together to make a story. And it's a great video to use with students to help them remember these elements of story structure.